Through a snowy field in the Wild West, the ruthless Bill rides her bike, spotting Lula standing quietly nearby. Soon, Bill arrives at a small church where a funeral is taking place. Everyone steps back the moment she enters. They all know how dangerous she is, and silently let her take a jacket from the coffin. Meanwhile, Lula returns home, where her brother Jack breaks the heartbreaking news: both their parents have died from smallpox. She can't stop herself from looking at their still bodies as she grieves deeply. Moments later, their grandfather Caleb shows up, and together they say a solemn prayer as a final farewell. Afterward, they set the house ablaze to stop the sickness from spreading and leave for their aunt's place in Texas. Somewhere in an abandoned town, Bill reunites with her gang. They all ride toward the river crossing, where they discover that Caleb's family has already paid for the ferry ride. Bill approaches Caleb, asking if he could pay for her too, even flirting with Lula in the process. Caleb steps forward to defend his granddaughter, pulling out his gun, which instantly makes the whole gang draw theirs as well. Just then, the ferry rope suddenly snaps, the sound startling Caleb so much that he fires his weapon by mistake. The bullet grazes Bill's head, and in return, she shoots Caleb twice, killing him instantly. After that, the gang knocks Jack unconscious and kidnaps Lula. Some time later, in Sylvester Town, the gang enters a store to steal some supplies. The shop owner has a gun, but fear gets the best of him, so he obeys their every command. Bill mocks him cruelly by making him suck on candy straight from her hand. Outside, Lula regains consciousness on horseback and spots the store owner's young son, so she whispers for him to run. But as the gang hears her and turns around, the store owner bursts out with his weapon and opens fire. One of the bullets injures a gang member's hand, and Bill instantly responds by shooting the owner straight in the head. Lula tries to escape but slips in the mud and falls. When the shop owner's son attempts to help her, he's shot dead as well. Bill walks out calmly and seizes Lula again. By the riverbank, Jack wakes up to see his cart and his sister missing. He kneels down to pray for his grandfather one last time but breaks down before finishing. Desperate to find Lula, he heads to Sylvester, where he sees a crowd forming in the street. The townsfolk have caught a random man they believe to be Bill and plan to hang him for the store owner's murder. Jack, thinking the man could be part of the gang, pushes through the angry mob trying to ask about his sister, but the people are too violent. He gets shoved and falls to the ground. When he looks up, he notices Jimmy Sue being dragged into a carriage by Hector, but no one hears her cries in the chaos. Moments later, the captured man is hanged in the town square. Jack runs to talk to him before he dies, but one of the furious locals knocks him out cold to stop him from interfering. Elsewhere in the forest, the gang stops to rest their horses. Lula tells Bill that her brother will come to rescue her, but Bill smirks and says that Jack is already dead. While Bill tends to her man's injured hand, Lula sneaks a pistol from a nearby horse. Unfortunately, fear freezes her before she can shoot, and Bill quickly takes the gun back. As punishment, she fires a few rounds near Lula's head, making her cry in terror. The next morning, Jack wakes up beside the hanged man's body. Gravedigger Eustace almost buries him alive, thinking he was dead. Eustace explains that Bill's gang was last seen heading north, and Jack begs to rent his wagon. But the wagon actually belongs to Jones, Eustace's associate. In town, Jones is trying to collect payment for a grave job, but the alderman refuses to pay full price and keeps mocking Jones for his short height. When the alderman threatens him, Jones fights back, and despite being small, he takes the man down in seconds, slashing his arm in the process. Then he points his gun right at the alderman's head, demanding full payment before leaving. Furious, the alderman orders his men to chase Jones, but Jones frees their horses to slow them down. As they open fire, Eustace drives up in the wagon and picks up Jones, who's hiding Jack in the back. Once they're out of town, Jack tells Jones about Lula and that Bill has a huge bounty on her head. Jones pulls out his scoped revolver and spots the alderman's men still following them. With a calm hand, he fires from afar, dropping one of them instantly, scaring the rest into retreating. Still, Jones refuses to help Jack, so he and Eustace continue on their way. Jack, desperate and determined, decides to follow them by stealing a horse from a nearby corpse. Meanwhile, Bill orders Lula to strip off her nice clothes so they can burn them, making sure she won't attract attention. Then she tosses her one of her gang members' shirts to wear. That night, Jones sneaks up on a sleeping Jack to rob him, but Eustace stops him, suggesting that the bounty could actually make their trip worth it. When Jack wakes, Jones tells him he'll help, but Jack will have to work for him now. The next morning, the alderman hires Simon and Malachi, the infamous DC brothers, to hunt Jones down. After a long day of riding, Jones's group stops to rest. Jack shares some of the quotes that Caleb used to tell him, words he believes come from the Bible. But Jones corrects him, explaining that they're actually lines from Hamlet, not scripture. The next day, Lula asks the gang to stop so she can relieve herself in the woods. As she grabs some branches for balance, she accidentally scratches her hand and leaves some blood behind. That night, while Lula tries to sleep, one of the men attempts to take advantage of her while the others hold her down. She grabs a nearby bottle and smashes it on the man's head before screaming for help. Bill wakes up, and the attacker pretends that Lula had tried to escape. But Bill doesn't buy it. She grabs him by the groin and squeezes hard, leaving him in agony. Later that night, Bill lies beside Lula and wraps an arm around her protectively as they fall asleep. The next morning, the DC brothers find Lula's blood on the ground and start tracking her. Meanwhile, Jack's group stops by a small town to trade the wagon for horses and gather more information. Jack walks into a tavern and is stunned to find Jimmy Sue there, forced to work as a pleasure girl. He's already developed a crush on her and offers to hire her, but Hector, her boss, says she isn't ready for clients yet. Jack insists, so Hector finally takes his money. Inside the room, Jack quickly reveals he doesn't want to sleep with her, he wants to help her escape. Jimmy doesn't believe him at first, but eventually agrees to leave. As they try to sneak out, Hector catches them, shoving Jack to the floor and slapping Jimmy across the face. Jack fights back, landing a few punches, but Hector is much stronger and smashes Jack's head against the counter. When Jimmy tries to help, he beats her too. Then, Hector begins choking Jack, blaming Jimmy for the situation before sending her away. Jack spots a fire poker nearby and smashes it across Hector's skull, finally knocking him out cold. Jimmy spits on Hector's face before escaping with Jack. When they reunite with Jones and Eustace, Jimmy tells them where she last saw Bill's gang. Back in the woods, Lula asks one of the gang members where they're taking her. The man explains they're headed to the thicket, a hidden outpost deep in the wilderness. He also reveals that Bill has kidnapped several girls before, and those who tried to run didn't live to tell the tale. Later that evening, Jones's group captures one of Bill's men and ties him up for questioning. They beat him badly, but he refuses to talk, so they torture him with nails. Still, he stays silent. Jones examines some documents on the table and realizes Bill's bounty isn't nearly as high as Jack claimed. He argues that it's not worth the trouble and, after a heated dispute, decides to leave with Eustace. Jimmy and Jack promise to help the wounded man if he talks, so he finally tells them about the thicket. Before Jack can ask more, the man dies from his injuries. Meanwhile, Lula takes advantage of the night to slip away while the gang sleeps. As she runs through the woods, she bumps straight into the DC brothers. They promise to keep her safe and bring her to their camp, telling her about their mission to hunt down a dwarf. But before long, the sound of hooves approaches the camp. Lula hides behind a tree as Bill storms in, pushing Simon directly onto the fire. Malachi tries to run, but Bill chases after Lula, captures her again, and rides back. Once she returns, she shoots Simon right in the chest, piercing his badge. Malachi rushes to his brother's side and holds him as he dies. The following morning, Jack and Jimmy track down Jones and Eustace to offer them a new deal. If they agree to help rescue Lula, Jack will pay them with his grandfather's land, which is now legally his. Jones accepts the offer and even hands Jack a gun. After riding for hours, they find out that Bill's gang has stopped at a small town. Jones enters an inn to buy whiskey and gather information, only to find Bill sitting there. Bill mocks his height, and Jones fires back, insulting her scarred face. Surprisingly, she respects his confidence, since most people either stay silent or ask uncomfortable questions. They end up sharing a mutual understanding, even splitting a piece of candy before she leaves. Outside, Lula overhears the gang members talking about Bill chatting with a dwarf. Through a small hole in the wall, she spots Joan speaking to the innkeeper and saying Jack's name out loud. Realizing her brother is alive and searching for her, Lula's eyes fill with hope. Meanwhile, Eustace and the teenagers are hidden behind the trees, weapons ready, but Jones never gives the signal to shoot because Lula stands too close to the crossfire. Suddenly, Malachi sneaks up behind Jimmy and takes her hostage. Jones stays calm and uses clever words to make Malachi talk. The bounty hunter learns what happened to Simon, and after hearing that Bill killed his brother, Malachi agrees to join them for revenge. At the same time, Bill finds a nearby church and storms in, brutally attacking the priest. Later that evening, Jones's group stops at another town to rest. Jack and Jimmy share a quiet moment, bonding even more, and they finally kiss. The next day, they learn that Bill burned the church down. The priest survived but is horribly scarred. He tells them how to find the thicket and warns that Lula won't survive until spring. He also reveals Bill's tragic past. Her scars were from her abusive mother, who saw her daughter as a curse for her sinful life. When Bill was still a child, she locked her mother inside their house and set it on fire. The priest still remembers the screams. Jack urges the group to move, but Jones reminds him that he's in charge. Fed up with being treated like a kid, Jack insults him, showing no fear of his skills. In response, Jones provokes him by offering Jimmy money for some fun. Furious, Jack lunges at him, but Jones easily takes him down and threatens to shoot. Jimmy steps in, saying they're all just scared and lashing out. She explains she understands how Lula must feel, and that Jones is helping not for money, but because he feels guilty for her situation. She urges them to stop fighting and work together. Eustace agrees, and after a pause, Jones lowers his gun and apologizes to Jimmy. Meanwhile, in the forest, Lula asks Bill if she's going to kill her. Bill says she doesn't know and strangely grows affectionate, resting her head on Lula's lap as they sit by the fire. The next day, Jones's group struggles to follow the gang because the snow keeps covering their tracks. Still, they press on until they reach the thicket. When night falls, they camp, and Jones and Jack reconcile. Jones opens up about his past, how his mother took her own life and his father sold him to a circus. Despite everything, he still remembers his family, assuring Jack that Lula will remember him too. At dawn, the group spots the gang holed up in a shack deep in the woods. They plan to wait for the perfect moment to strike, but Malachi, blinded by revenge, sneaks behind the outhouse. When a man steps out, Malachi attacks, but the gangster quickly overpowers him, stabbing him repeatedly. Jack wants to rush to his aid, but Jones stops him to avoid exposing their position. Unfortunately, Jimmy can't hold back and fires her gun, killing the attacker. Eustace decides it's time to strike, so he and the men move forward while telling Jimmy to stay behind. The wounded gangster crawls back into the shack, and soon bullets fly in every direction. Lula hides while Bill ignores the chaos at first, calmly loading her weapon. As the gunfight rages, Jones and his team move closer. He circles behind the cabin, while Lula sees him through a crack in the wall. She slips out the back door, and Bill, realizing it, follows with open fire, dragging Lula into the foggy woods. Eustace and Jack manage to scare off the rest of the gang, but Jack runs into the forest after his sister, ignoring Jones's warnings. Meanwhile, a surviving gang member finds Jimmy and attacks. She shoots him once, but he lunges at her, and they wrestle in the snow. She ends up on top for a second before he stabs her in the stomach. He mutters a few words in his native tongue before both die together. Elsewhere, Jones discovers Eustace badly wounded during the shootout. He sets up his scoped gun just as he hears footsteps approaching. Eustace goes out to distract the enemy while Jones steadies his aim. Suddenly, a bandit jumps on him, and they wrestle violently in the snow. In the forest, Jack follows Bill's laughter through the fog. He hides behind a tree when he hears a gunshot. Bill taunts him from the shadows, then shoots him in the shoulder. When he tries to rise, she fires again, hitting the other shoulder. Lula rushes to his side just as Bill tries to finish him off, but her gun clicks empty. Lula seizes the moment and tackles Bill, punching her over and over. Dizzy and laughing, Bill manages to shove her away and pulls out a knife, ready to slash her throat. Before she can, Jones arrives and shoots her right in the head. Bill whispers, "Mama," before falling dead in the snow. Lula hugs her wounded brother, but Jack can't move. He dies in her arms, and she breaks down in tears. Jones goes searching for Eustace and finds him barely alive. The old man smiles upon hearing that Bill is dead and dies peacefully, watching the sunrise with tears in his eyes. Later, Lula decapitates Bill and, with Jones's help, brings the head to the nearest sheriff. The sheriff offers fame and recognition, but Jones insists on remaining anonymous. To their surprise, the Real bounty was large after all. After getting new clothes and a wagon, Lula tells Jones she's all alone now and asks him to stay by her side. Sometime later, at Caleb's land, the two live together peacefully. They've dug a grave for Jack in the backyard, and Lula carries a small scar on her neck, a mark from Bill's knife and a reminder of everything she survived. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories like this. Thanks for watching.